That's great. Thank you very much, Don. We have a receipt of the deputation. Councillor Saito, all those in favor? Great, thank you. Now we have a public question period. If a person wishes to address the Governance Committee about any matter that's on the agenda.
I just have some questions regarding the Council Code of Conduct, and I kind of threw this together this morning, so it's not as coherent as I'd like it to be. And in some cases, I just need clarification on certain things. And just to be clear, this is the scan or printout of the April 2011 Code of Conduct. So I know that the agenda has a new one, so the changes may have been made. But I just want to go through some of this. It says members shall serve, key principles, 1A, members of council shall serve and be seen to be served, to serve their constituents in a conscientious and diligent manner. And I think I know what conscientious and diligent means. But then what happens is that when you get to rule number 9, what happens is it defines, it has a different definition of diligently. And it's a bit of a surprise in that under rule number 9, it states, where is it? To participate, I'll have to get it here, I guess. Where's rule number 9? To participate diligently. Here it is. I'm looking at the wrong thing. Right there. Again, rule number 1 says they're to serve the constituents in a conscientious and diligent manner, but down in rule number 9, under conduct at council and committee meetings, it looks like diligently is, the definition of diligently is restricted to attendance, meaning to participate diligently means, that isn't it either, sorry, okay, let me just read it. To participate diligently means that a member shall not be absent from council or committee meetings for more than 3 consecutive scheduled meetings or on a regular basis. And I just kind of, I can't seem to find it. You know, when you got a computer, you can word search. I'm not that good at skimming anymore, but just wonder if there's, somebody can address that. And the idea of what does diligently mean? Does it mean diligently as in what we all learned in school? Or limited to attendance?
My first guess on that would be that diligently is used in 2 different contexts within this, but I'd like to ask Mr. Swayze to make sure that it's clear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Participate diligently doesn't say attend meetings diligently. It says participate diligently, so that's before the meeting, that's during the meeting, that's after the meeting, and that's throughout your service as a councillor, in my opinion.
Great,
Good.
Thank you.
Good, because that's the way that I interpreted it too. Next, conduct, again, conduct at council meetings.
Could you, sorry to interrupt her, so that Councillor Saito would like to make a comment.
Yeah, sorry, I just want to comment that, because I just found the section that you were referring to about the absence, and I think in a way you're right, that it does sound as if it has a different definition rather than what we all know as diligence. Where it actually says to participate diligently means that a member shall not be absent. And I think that's what you were getting at, that we're giving a very specific definition to diligence here as meaning absence.
Well, rule number 9 seems to suggest that all you have to do is show up regularly.
Yeah, well, and that's what it says in section 4.
Elsewhere in the code, it talks about a liberal interpretation.
Yeah.
So a liberal interpretation of diligence is what we were all taught in school.
Yeah, no, I actually, I agree with you there, because I don't think that it should say to participate diligently means that a member shall not be absent, and that's what the exact wording is.
They can be present and not be diligent.
Exactly.
Oh, yes.
So I'm going to suggest that, that we pull that out and take a look at more appropriate wording.
I can look at that, sure. I can come back with something.
Great.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there on that one.
And under rule number 9, it says, over here, members shall conduct themselves at council meetings and council and committee meetings with decorum in accordance with the provisions of the council procedure bylaw. And, you know, that's great and everything, but I understand too that there have been changes made to the procedure bylaw, but I have a kind of problem with it. That looks good here on paper in the council code of conduct, but when you examine the council procedure bylaw and you look at part 3, rules of order and debate, this is the current procedural bylaw. It says, no member shall speak disrespectfully of any member of the royal family, the governor general, the lieutenant governor of any province, any member of federal, provincial, or regional council, any member of council, or any employee of the city. But it leaves most Mississaugans out, because there's no way there for members of the public. They've been left out of this. So what I'm saying is rule number 9 on the code of conduct looks really good here on paper, but when you go a step further and you examine the council procedure bylaw, it provides protection for respect for everybody except a member of the public.
Madam Mayor?
Has been occasions, whether we like it or not, where members of council have spoken disrespectful of the citizen. So I agree. I think I would think that that be added, and we should be respectful of all, not just one another and staff, etc. Of course, there's also occasions when there's been disrespectful of employee. This covers it, but the public isn't. I would move that that be changed to public.
Okay. Sir, it's of the procedural bylaw. It's part 3, rules of order and debate, and it would be rule number 27. It's the procedural bylaw, not the council code of conduct.
Yeah, I'm looking at this.
And that means I don't have to lobby here. Madam Mayor did it for me.
Mr. Chairman, I would also add, it'd be nice if we had, and the public be respectful
Yes.
of members of council and staff, because we've had some serious situations, but we can't control that. But I think we can control how we deal with the public.
Correct. Yes, thank you. Good pick. Sorry, Councillor Carlson.
Just if we're going to clean this up a bit, perhaps they could make reference to federal and provincial MP or MPPs, despite the fact that we think they're councillors, they're not members of regional councils. So was that disrespectful? We'll have to think about that. So you may want to add MPs or MPPs. And by the way, I support the mayor's idea of the thought that we include all members of the public.
Actually, the respectful workplace policy kicks in too and protects, especially the statement of commitment, protects staff and council and everything else. There are rather some impressive consequences for members of the public if they are remotely disrespectful at times. So anyway, that's that one. Let's see, now we've got rule number 10. And nuts, I didn't run that off. Rule number 10, okay, this shows my, I've been reading the Council Code of Conduct dozens of times. So rule number 10 is media communications. And, okay, I've got to go by memory. Yeah, okay. There's two provisions. media communications, you would think there would be a provision that would say that there would be honesty and accurate communication regarding anything happening in Mississauga to the media, whether it's social media or TV or interviews. However, when you read the Council Code of Conduct number 10, it's only limited to members of council have to be communicate accurately just in two very narrow situations. The first being, I've got it here, so that might help. Members of council will accurately communicate the decisions of Mississauga. Members of council will accurately communicate the decisions of Mississauga City Council, even if they disagree with the majority of decision of council, and by doing so affirm the respect for and integrity in the decision-making processes of council. So one way is you have to communicate accurately, but it only refers to decisions of council. So, so that's one. And the other is, and this one I definitely understand, item 2 says, this is still from the Code of Conduct, members of council will keep confidential information confidential until such time as the matter can be properly made public. I get that. That has to do with all kinds of privacy issues and in-camera stuff. But I'm really puzzled about why communicating accurately with the media is only limited to decisions of council. Because basically what you're saying is the only time you need to communicate accurately or honestly is at the council decisions. Any other time, you got a green light, right? And again, I could be misinterpreting this.
Councillor Saito.
Thank you. Ursula, this section only refers to communicating decisions of council.
I can't hear you.
Sorry, this section only refers to communicating decisions of council.
Exactly.
Which is what, and that's the only, what you're asking then is that there should be something in the Code of Conduct that says that members of council should communicate at all times.
It would be nice. That would be the held to the higher standard idea.
I guess also it's, in that case, once we communicate with the media, we have no control over what the media actually writes. So there are many, and you're aware of that there are many times when the member of council can communicate honestly, openly, and very frankly with the media. And what comes out in the article is very different. Or even on a video, if someone takes a clip and you can take something totally out of context and it makes it sound as if the member of council was saying something totally different than if you took the whole thing in context. That's very easy to do. You can take 4 words out of a sentence and change the entire meaning of the sentence. I guess... when the Code of Conduct was written, I guess the councillors and the staff who put it together in the first place only wanted to deal with the majority decisions of council to ensure that a councillor would not go to the media and start, go off on a wild tangent about a decision of council that they disagreed with, and behaving disrespectfully. I mean, I think we're allowed to say, I disagreed with that, I voted against it, and here are my reasons why. But, you don't want a member of council saying, the other 10 members of council were totally, out to lunch that day, they were wrong, they've, done XXX, and totally disrespecting that decision of council. But I guess I have no problem with a clause going into the, I'm not sure it's needed, but I personally would have no problem with a clause going in saying that members of council should communicate accurately at all times on all issues with members of the media. Where it goes after that, we don't have any control.
That's right, you don't. Yeah. But I would appreciate that, so that, again, if there's just kind of a wider, I don't know.
Yeah, I have no problem with that. I don't think any of us would, you know.
And by the way, I mean, I interpret that as, let's say that there's one councillor who disagrees with all the others. I think he's allowed to disagree, provided that he communicates accurately on the disagreement. It's how you do it. So it doesn't, am I right? A councillor can, if he disagrees, still disagree in the media, provided he communicates it accurately. Yeah.
And we do that.
Yeah.
Okay,
next.
We have a history of doing that here. Yes, sir, are you giving me much longer? So, because actually your time limits, the little bells rung for me, but how much more do you have?
Was that 15 minutes?
Yeah.
All right. Let me see. Okay, I got to save that one then for later. Okay, this is the one that has caused the most confusion. Oh, I can't even read that. You won't be able to read it. It's a rule.
Yeah.
I had other rules, but I appreciate the 15 minutes, and I understand I shouldn't. So, but this
Well,
one.
actually, we talked a little bit too, to be fair. So, continue.
You know, you got this council code of conduct, and there's, and then it says, in exceptional circumstances, a member may request council grant exemption from any policy. And this is under failure to adhere to council policies and procedures. And it says, members shall adhere to such bylaws, policies, and procedures adopted by council that are applicable to them, which is pretty well every policy, bylaw, and procedure. And then down here, and I didn't even bother really reading that, all makes sense. Then it says, it's extraordinary. It's like this escape clause. It says, in exceptional circumstances, a member may request council grant an exemption from any policy. And I recall back in 2010 that council passed a bylaw so that they didn't have to adhere to their, I think it was a purchasing bylaw. This was so that you could get all the deadlines for the infrastructure, remember? And you guys were under, I shouldn't call you guys, and you councillors, elected officials were under huge strain, so you realized that you couldn't go and follow the purchase bylaw or whatever it was. So for a year, you granted yourself exemption from that to meet deadlines. I get that made sense, so that there are times when you can do it, but I sure don't understand this. In exceptional circumstances, a member may request council grant an exemption from any policy. And any policy, does it also include procedures, bylaws, and even the council code of conduct?
Again, I'm going to ask Mr. Swayze to comment on that. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I support this clause because, and I can't give you examples, but there may be circumstances when a councillor wants to do something that may be contrary to a policy, but it's very appropriate that he or she do it. And if somebody makes an argument to all of council, and all of council votes favorably for it, to exempt this councillor from this one activity, I don't see anything wrong with that. It's council as a whole making a decision, and I think that's appropriate.
Okay, well, that was one of the questions was that there was a considerable debate in the social media about whether that meant before they did something or after, like after the fact. But it looks like it's before you do something.
Exactly, and Councillor Saito actually has an example of that, but I mean, in that rare exception, that person would have to come to everyone on council would have to agree to that. So I think that would be, I think there's a lot of checks and balances just right there alone. I think you'd have to agree with that. Councillor Saito.
Yeah, Ursula, just as an example, under the elected officials expenses policy, we recently revised the policy and we set a maximum, I think it was $500, that a member of council could contribute in any form to an organization, to an individual organization. There might be a circumstance, and it was one that I raised, that the Meadowvale Community Partnership, which you're aware of, we're no longer working together, but I rented the Meadowvale Theatre for them to hold a parenting seminar, free seminar once a year. And the cost for me to rent a theatre was $600 to $700, which was over the $500. Under the expense policy, I would not have been permitted to do that, even though it was out of my my expenses. So by allowing council to grant an exemption, and that might come up with other organizations where there may be a need for the councillor to assist an organization, fundraising organization, in providing a program in the community. So under that situation, if I needed to do that, to rent the room, whether it was once or twice for an organization, it was going to take me over $500, I would be able to come to council and put the case before council saying this is what I'm doing, and ask for an exemption that I could spend out of my expenses over the $500 for that particular year for that organization. I think under the procedural bylaw, the one exemption I guess that we have been doing is, it's on the agenda today, was the lunch recess. We have a policy that says, on a procedural, that we recess for lunch from 12 until 1. In actual fact, we've been doing working lunches. So we're not actually taking a break between 12 and 1. We eat while we're working and do the in-camera or whatever, needs to be done during that time. So in theory, it is not precisely we're not precisely following the procedure. The clerk is moving that we amend that today, but that would be an example of an exemption. So it's not necessarily an exemption is for something bad for the councillor to do. There'd have to be a really valid reason that we would bring prior to doing it to council and request the exemption.
Okay, that's very reasonable. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Madam Mayor.
I can see her question on it. I think we've been able to follow certain procedures. Sure, under it's a majority vote that would determine. I heard somebody say every council agreed. It doesn't need a majority. It doesn't need every member of council. I think the concern is that I would hope, and I think we have followed practices, that before a policy is changed, that there's either a report or something that would back up the change. Otherwise, it could be looked as if any policy of the city, let's take development levies. We have a development levy policy. Could somebody come to council and decide someday that we lower all the development policies? I think I know what you're concerned about, and I think we have some built-in protection for the changes of policy. Pretty well, this council will say, refer to staff for a report. The incident that Councillor Saito had, that affects, that's a minor one, really. But I know what you're thinking of, major policy, that we could change it at any time, is your concern.
Yeah, to some extent.
Yeah. I see, I know her concern, but we have built in, it doesn't say in there that it's based on this, this, and this, but I think our practice has been that before we would make a major change in policy, we usually refer it back to staff for a report to tell us what the implications are of a policy change. We haven't done it always, I have to tell you, but I think we're followed in 98% of the time.
Did you have one more?
I guess I can wait.
You want to wait on that?
You know, I should do some homework on the others.
No, we really appreciate your research. You're doing a great job. Thank you. And thanks for your, I have a motion to, Councillor Saito.
Thank you, Ursula. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear me up there, but we have asked for the public to provide us with comments on the proposed changes to the Code of Conduct. So if there's anything that you did not raise today, if you could send it to us in writing. I think to the clerk's office was what the request was. Rather than waiting to come back to a future meeting, because we'd like to get the Code of Conduct changes finalized at least for the next year. It's a fluid document, so I mean changes can be made in the future. But if you could please send your comments in writing, I think that would be very helpful, and then they can be dealt with at a future meeting.
Okay.
Okay, so don't wait. Come back.
Great. Motion for receipt? No. Thank you. Oh, that was a good conversation. Excellent. Now we have matters to be considered. Approval of the minutes of the previous meeting.